America's battle of the ages. Furious race to White House. Can Kamala conquer all? Or Donald Dhamaka ahead? Who is winning America? Big focus on Newstrack.
It's being called the Armageddon election. On the eve of polling, both contenders Trump and Harris focused on the big prize of Pennsylvania, the largest of the 7 swing states expected to decide the American presidential elections. Opinion polls showed Donald Trump and Kamala Harris locked in a tight race. It's going down to the wire.
He just endorsed me.
It's a tight fight to the finish. In less than 48 hours, America decides its next president. Donald Trump and Kamala Harris pushed their closing messages to voters on the last day of campaigning. Republican Donald Trump made a last pitch for support in Pennsylvania, the largest of the 7 states expected to decide the presidential election. Trump repeatedly criticized the U.S. election process.
They are fighting so hard to steal this damn thing. Look at what's going on. Look at what's going on in your state. Every day, they're talking about extending hours and stuff. Who ever heard of this stuff? We should have one-day voting and paper ballots. It's a damn shame. And I'm the only one that talks about it because everyone's afraid to damn talk about it. And then they accuse you of being a conspiracy theorist. These are conspiracy, and they want to lock you up. They want to put you in jail. The ones that should be locked up are the ones that cheat on these horrible elections that we go through in our country. And I don't know what's going to happen, but for future elections, I won't be even a part of it. But you ought to damn well go to paper ballots. You ought to go to voter ID. And you ought to have the election over by 9 o'clock. I'm hearing now they're going to take weeks. Can you imagine? They spend all this money on machines, and they're going to say, we may take an extra 12 days to determine. And what do you think happens during that 12 days? What do you think happens? These elections have to be decided by 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock on Tuesday night. Bunch of crooked people. These are crooked people.
Trump, who continues to falsely claim that his 2020 loss to Democratic President Joe Biden was the result of widespread fraud, insists that he is winning.
Our country is a crooked country, okay? It's a crooked country, and we're going to make it straight. We're going to make it straight, and it's not an easy thing to do.
Opinion polls showed Donald Trump and Kamala Harris locked in a tight race, with Harris bolstered by strong support among women voters, while Trump gains ground with Hispanic voters, particularly men. Democratic presidential nominee Kamala Harris made her closing pitch at a rally in East Lansing, Michigan. Harris addressed Michigan's 200,000 Arab Americans, starting her speech with a nod to civilian victims of Israel's conflict with Hamas in Gaza and Hezbollah in Lebanon.
This year has been difficult, given the scale of death and destruction in Gaza, and given the civilian casualties and displacement in Lebanon. It is devastating. And as president, I will do everything in my power to end the war in Gaza. To bring home the hostages, end the suffering in Gaza, ensure Israel is secure, and ensure the Palestinian people can realize their right to dignity, freedom, security, and self-determination. Are we ready to fight for it?
Harris did not mention Trump's name during the 25-minute speech, only referring to certain individuals.
I believe health care should be a right and not just a privilege of those who can afford it. And to those certain individuals who still want to get rid of the Affordable Care Act and take us back to the days when insurance companies could deny people with pre-existing conditions, well, you all know what we say. We are not going back. We are not going back. We are not going back.
America's moment of reckoning is here. Bureau Report, India Today.
I want to go across to our correspondents joining us from the United States. Geeta Mohan, our Foreign Affairs Editor, joins us from New York. We've got Rohit Sharma joining us from Washington, D.C. It's politically hot, but the weather seems a lot colder than it is in India at this moment. Geeta, you've seen many an Indian election and some American elections as well. How does this differ from everything we get to see back home?
Well, in terms of the scale, in terms of how the approaches, the media strategy, the election strategy, very, very different. What's on the agenda, what really matters, and how things make a difference over here as opposed to India. The election system itself is very different. So yes, it is rather confusing for people who are watching back home as to how is it that one person gets an entire state rather than getting the electoral numbers, as is the case in India. So interesting, Rahul, interesting play over here when it comes to elections. But there are 7 battleground states this time around. They normally differ from 6, 7 to 8. This time around there are 7. And Pennsylvania is going to be a very, very important one at that. Whether if Trump is going to get a hold of Pennsylvania or not is the big question. I'm in New York, and interestingly, New York has always been quite polarized since Trump stepped in. This time around as well, we have some Kamala Harris supporters here, but you have to come on the ground to see how many of them are actually coming out and supporting Donald Trump. You'd be surprised. There are people who are Hispanics, minorities, South Asians, Indian community I've been speaking with. All of them, Rahul, over here are coming out and saying that they prefer Trump to Kamala Harris. Might be different in different states, might be different in the battleground states, but in New York, it does seem like Republicans and Trump does have an upper hand, an edge over Kamala Harris.
Okay, Rohit, you've been covering this election very closely. Who do you think is ending this contest stronger? It seemed for a while that Kamala Harris was in the lead. Then it seemed Trump had edged past her in the battleground states. Now, a lot of the US polls seem to suggest that Harris has picked up some momentum right towards the end of the campaign.
So, I mean, it is very interesting, Rahul. You know, we've seen a lot of US elections over the years. Nothing, you know, the only thing that comes this close is the election of 2000, which is Bush versus Gore, and all came down to one state of Florida. And I think this time around, as Geeta was saying, it is the state of Pennsylvania. I spoke to somebody who's on the ground in Pennsylvania, somebody on Kamala Harris's campaign, and they texted me back saying it's anxious energy. They're getting flashbacks of 2016 where they thought they had it in the bag, but anything can happen. And I think most likely, Rahul, I think it's going to come down to voters who are going to be showing up to polling booths tomorrow. A lot of people have voted early. About 70 million people have used mail-in ballots and turned to election centers to vote. But can Kamala Harris and her campaign make sure that voters who haven't voted in these battleground states show up to polls tomorrow? I think that will decide who gets to win all these important battleground states. Also, the fact that, you know, everybody has been on the ground in Pennsylvania from both the campaigns. We're seeing Kamala Harris. She's going to be in Pennsylvania today. She's going to visit the 3 towns, Pittsburgh, Allentown, and the Bucks County, I think, if I remember correctly. She's going to be in these 3 counties and you know, suburban areas today to, again, in Pennsylvania, make her case so that voters show up in these suburban states, while Trump is going to North Carolina, he's going to Michigan, and he's also going to go to Pennsylvania. So very, very close, very tight race. I think it's going to go down the wire. And remember, during 2016, Trump only won Pennsylvania by a fraction of a point. And in 2020, Joe Biden only won by 1 point. So whoever gets to win Pennsylvania probably would have their neck ahead. Very close, we can't tell. And I've talked to a lot of people on the ground. It seems like right now it's really dead heat for both the candidates.
Rohit Sharma and Geeta Mohan, thank you for joining us. We'll keep tracking your updates all through this week on India Today. Election fraud versus democracy in danger. Abortion ban versus reproductive rights. A convicted felon versus a criminal prosecutor. America will choose between two starkly different candidates. Here's how Harris and Trump have squared off on key issues.
How do you like my garbage truck? This truck is in honor of Kamala and Joe Biden. And I just wanted to let you know that 250 million people, that's what I think the real number is for making America great again. 250 million, the real number. They don't think in terms of garbage, okay? They don't use terms like that. And it's a shame.
Over the last 8 years, Donald Trump has become more confused, more unstable, and more angry. And it is clear he has become increasingly unhinged. But the last time, at least there were people who could control him. But notice, they're not with him this time.
Kamala's gross incompetence disqualifies her from being President of the United States of America. She is grossly incompetent. All you have to do is look at her interviews, look at what she did the other night on fake news, CNN. Just take a look. She couldn't answer a question. She's unfit for office. Everyone knows it. No one respects her. No one trusts her. No one takes her seriously. Everyone knows she is a very low IQ individual.
My economic plan actually will strengthen America's economy. They've reviewed Donald Trump's plan and have determined he will weaken America's economy, he will ignite inflation, and he will bring on a recession by the middle of next year.
The bond between the United States and Israel is strong and enduring. And if and when they say, when I'm president, I don't say that, I never say that. If and when I'm president of the United States, it will once again be stronger and closer than it ever was before. We have to win this election. If we don't win this election, there's tremendous consequence for everything. November 5th will be the most important day in the history of our country. I think it will also be the most important day in the history of Israel, if you want to know the truth. I believe that. I think you believe that, too.
As president, I will do everything in my power to end the war in Gaza. To bring home the hostages, end the suffering in Gaza, ensure Israel is secure, and ensure the Palestinian people can realize their right to dignity, freedom, security, and self-determination.
But I've come today with a message of hope for all Americans. With your vote, this election, most important election you've ever even thought about voting in, I will end inflation. I will stop the invasion of criminals pouring into our country, and I will bring back the American dream.
We have an opportunity in this election to turn the page on a decade of Donald Trump trying to keep us divided and afraid of each other. That is who he is, but Madison, that is not who we are.
Do you like it better now or 4 years ago? Well, I ask it a different. Do you like it better now or 4 years ago? And I've come today with a message of hope for all Americans. With your vote on Tuesday, I will end inflation. I will stop the invasion of massive numbers of criminals coming into our country. Thank you very much, Kamala and Joe. And I will bring back the American dream, and we'll bring it back stronger than ever before. But this is all you need to know. Kamala broke it, and we will fix it, and we're going to fix it fast.
Just imagine on January 20th, Because if he is elected, if Donald Trump is elected, he's going to be sitting in that Oval Office stewing over his enemies list. Because he spends full time plotting revenge and retribution. So imagine on January 20th, it's either that, him plotting over his enemies list, or me working for you on my to-do list.
At this moment, attention squarely focused on who's likely to win the presidential elections in the United States. If you think Maharashtra and Jharkhand are tight elections, don't know, can't say, too close to call, well, the United States is a whole different ballgame. And to talk about this, we're joined on this broadcast by Ishan Tharoor. He's a well-known columnist at the Washington Post. I have Pramit Pal Chowdhury, head of the India practice at Eurasia Group. And we have Arun Kumar Singh, who's been India's ambassador to the United States and is a non-resident senior fellow at Carnegie, India. I want to go across to Ishan first. Ishan, very rarely have pollsters and pundits been quite as confused. Are they just hedging their bets and therefore not giving clear answers? All these battleground states actually likely to go down to the wire in the way that these polls are suggesting?
Look, the polls have been suggesting for a very, very long time that it's a dead heat, and it is a dead heat. So, I mean, there's, on a certain level, they're right. Of course, there are lots of different models, lots of different polls, and lots of different polls that say certain things, point to different trends happening that could tilt one way or the other. We're talking about an election where the difference will be such a narrow margin of votes that it's, of course, quite difficult to really know come Tuesday night, and probably not just Tuesday night, come Wednesday morning, perhaps even Thursday morning, what some of the results may be. And so we're in a situation now where, yes, because of the particular anachronism of the American system, it comes down to a handful of certain states that are really up in the air. And both campaigns think they're making a strong last push and hoping to consolidate some gains.
A lot of what you do, Pramit Pal, at the Eurasia Group is risk advisory. What is the Eurasia Group advising its clients in terms of who do you think is more likely to win at this moment? 46, 48, 49, 50. It's looking really, really tight. Is that how tight it's going to be? Or do you think everyone's just hedging because they can't be quite sure?
Well, I think they can't be quite sure. I think my companies, from what I remember of our American team, continues to believe Trump has an edge. But it's really down to, I think, one of the calculations, as little as 80,000 voters will make the decision. That's not a surprise. Biden defeated Trump with only about, I think, 45,000 votes made the decision for him, gave him the Electoral College. This time it'll go down to almost the same number. Once you're down to such tiny numbers, the polling is almost incapable of actually predicting anything. And on top of that, polling in America now is as bad as polling in India. It has repeatedly gotten got the last two presidential elections wrong. It's been incredibly poor in measuring, should we say, the degree of, in the last two elections, of Trump support. It grossly underestimated it. And then in the midterms, it swung in the other direction and overestimated Republican support. So if you look at a graph, there's a recent graph that came out by a group of pollsters who looked at it and said the degree of error now in U.S. polling is at a record high. America just can't work out what its own voters want to do.
It's not just America. Haryana shows us that that's the case in India as well, but that's a whole different conversation for another day. Ambassador Singh, you've seen American politics at close quarters during your time there. Looked at from the outside, this Trump campaign looks more organized than the 2016 campaign for sure, arguably more organized than 2020 as well. Your sense of who carries the momentum in the final stages?
So I had watched closely the elections in 2008, 12, 16, 20, and of course now the current one. And you're right that this time perhaps the Trump campaign is more organized, although Trump continues to be unpredictable, unpredictable in many ways. But I still think it's difficult to say who carries the momentum. Now, if you recall 2016, it was only after midnight that the Clinton campaign finally conceded that she might be losing and then came back to concede only the next day. And in the 2020 campaign, Biden came on stage late at night and said, although the trends seem to be against us, we are likely to win. So just hang on there. So I think, as you said, there was a sense that immediately after Kamala Harris' nomination came through, she had the edge. After a while, Trump was catching on. But of late, she's again got the momentum. So I think on balance, one should just say it's difficult to predict. And I think from India's point of view, it doesn't matter who wins.
Ishan, let's build on that. Does it matter to India who wins? To some extent, in some ways, it does, because Trump comes in. If he increases tariffs, that impacts India. He's also more mercurial and transactional. On the other hand, Kamala Harris as president could potentially want to create more troubles for Prime Minister Modi and the Indian government in a lot of things that someone like Donald Trump won't care very much about.
I think the ambassador is right. There's been all signs from the Biden administration that India is a priority for the United States. They see India as a strategic partner in the future, and they wouldn't want to rock the boat. The wild card, as you said, is Trump's economic plans, his vision for really disrupting global trade and slapping tariffs on virtually everything. And then, of course, Trump's approach to foreign policy in general is so based on his kind of sense of bilateral deal-making, his transactionalism, that there could be moments where India could be surprised by certain deals that Trump makes, Trump wants to make with India or wants to make with other countries as well. So I think in terms of continuity and reliability, there's a safer bet with the Harris administration. I think, before we even talk about the foreign policy implications, the other thing to really know about and recognize is that if Trump loses, he is not going to accept it. He has made it very abundantly clear that defeat is not something he's going to accept. He doesn't still accept his defeat in 2020, and the entire ecosystem around him has already started to lay the ground with conspiracy theories about the scams and steal happening right now. So we're heading for a pretty volatile moment in the event that Kamala Harris does win.
Pramit Pal, does it matter from India's perspective who wins? I get the sense by talking to many in government that they believe that Donald Trump might be easier to deal with. They also have a good rapport, the Prime Minister and Donald Trump. Will that make a difference, or do you think that Kamala Harris too is just likely to carry on in the same spirit as Joe Biden?
Well, I think the core relationship will remain exactly the same. The core of China, technology, though the Indo-Pacific, all of that will remain, has been constant with both the Biden administration and with the Trump administration in the past. If you look at the foreign policy teams on either side, we saw our foreign minister met Philip Gordon, who's likely to be the national security advisor of Kamala Harris recently, and didn't seem to have any problems at that meeting, or was reassured that there would be continuity. And I gather some members of the Biden team, including, let's say, CIA Director Bill Burns, would probably continue in a Harris administration. So the continuity is strong. But there will be, yes, areas on the margins in which they will differ. Kamala Harris is a legal person. She tends to be much more focused she seems to be more legalistic, if you wish, in her thinking. So issues like civil rights, the Panun case that's there between India and US will probably become a bit more difficult under her. On the other hand, with Trump, one area which Prime Minister Modi takes very seriously, finance, green finance and climate generally, would almost disappear off the government-to-government agenda because his administration, or he doesn't take that seriously. So, but those are fringe issues. The broad strategic relationship will remain, I think, completely solid, and I don't think that will change at all.
Ambassador Arun Singh, is it correct that the MEA would find it easier to work with a Trump administration? Does Kamala Harris as president and her administration pose a greater headache for India on issues like Khalistani terrorists being supported by countries like the US and Canada? Is there likely to be more prickliness with Kamala Harris than with Donald Trump?
So I can't speak for the MEA or the government. I've been away from the government for more than 8 years. But based on my understanding of the situation and my understanding of how both Republican and Democratic administrations have handled India over the last couple of decades, including the Obama-Biden administration, the Biden-Harris administration, and the Trump administration, I think we should be broadly okay. There is, in some quarters, sometimes a perception that Trump is easier to handle. But if you go back and recall the Trump presidency, he was very, very unpredictable. He criticized India several times for what he said were high tariffs in India. He ridiculed the Indian leaders. He imposed tariffs on steel and aluminum imports from India, ostensibly on national security grounds, which you can't explain if India is a strategic partner. He removed generalized scheme of preferences, under which many Indian products had duty-free access in the US market. And then you recall that in 2019, he invited Imran Khan to the White House when he wanted Pakistan to pressurize Taliban into getting into an agreement with the US. And in that White House meeting, he said that he was ready to mediate on Kashmir, and that the Indian Prime Minister had asked him to mediate on Kashmir, which was simply not true. And the Indian Foreign Minister had to, a couple of days later, say in Parliament that there's no truth to what the President had said. And also in the Trump administration, both governments had tried to do a limited trade agreement. And they discussed that for 2 years, and they couldn't even succeed in getting that. So, the Trump administration will have broadly a positive approach, as we saw with the Indo-Pacific strategy, the starting of the Quad meetings. Similarly, in the Biden-Harris administration, we saw the Quad being elevated to summit-level meetings, and this whole new initiative on critical and emerging technologies, which has really deepened the technology partnership between India and the US. The authorization for General Electric to transfer 80% of technology for the F414 engines, or the authorization for the armed drones to be supplied to India. So these are the things that happened during the Biden-Harris presidency. So I think in the broad strategic convergence that is there, we should be okay with either winning the election. There will be different sets of challenges with the two, and we have to find a way to handle and manage those differences.
Ishan, how is Trump of circa 2024 looking different from what we saw between 2016 and 2020?
Well, the first thing is that he's older, exhibiting more signs of that age, and there are mounting concerns about his actual acuity and fitness in certain moments. He's had some quite worrying public displays. He is an angrier Trump. He is operating on a lot of grievance. Much of it is personal because of the mounting legal cases that he's faced and that he will be able to evade if he wins the presidency. But then there's also, he is channeling a right-wing nationalist movement that operates on grievance and anger, that is inflamed about various issues, most especially immigration, which may also have interesting wrinkles for the Indian-US relationship. And he's somebody who has really, his pitch to his base has been, this is going to be an all gloves off presidency. I'm not going to take any prisoners here. I will be your vengeance. And he's promised all sorts of astonishing executive acts. Some of them he may not be able to actually accomplish. But he's really going to take the US into an interesting chapter of its democracy if he wins.
Why has the Kamala Harris campaign, Ishan, according to you, failed to take off? When she came in soon after President Biden announced that he was stepping aside, the gap in the polls was much more. From there on, her campaign seems to have faltered to some extent and not really taken off, leading to someone like Barack Obama having to tell Black American men not to vote for Donald Trump and instead stick with Team Harris.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's failed to take off. I think, yes, she came in quite late. The circumstances in which she entered were quite extraordinary, but we're seeing a campaign that is trying to build this sort of supposed big tent coalition. She's trying to appeal to centrists, appeal to moderate Republicans who can't really stomach Trump, as opposed to really turning the way Trump does towards the Democratic base, which in many cases are people of color, young people, poorer people perhaps in the cities. She's not making that pitch. She's making the pitch of the centrist establishment, which was the exact same pitch that Hillary Clinton made in 2016. But I think the Kamala campaign is also very mindful of what went wrong in 2016, and they believe that they've cobbled together the kind of votes and the kind of message that will make the difference in these pivotal swing states. And they're doing quite well, perhaps even better than Biden did in 2020 with white college-educated voters. And this is the curious thing. And you're seeing, of course, the Democrats will always win a majority of women, a majority of people of color. But yes, you are seeing on the margins, men especially, and men of color especially, indicating that they are more likely now than before to consider Trump and the Republicans.
Well, before we get to Maharashtra and Jharkhand, there is the results in the United States to deal with. We keep going back to Ishan Tharoor, Pramit Pal and Arun Kumar Singh. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insights on the build-up to the final climax in the US presidential elections. Thank you.
Thank you.
While most opinion polls in the United States show a dead heat between Trump and Harris, the state of Iowa, a deeply red state, has sprung a last-minute surprise. Kamala Harris has taken a surprising lead in a voter survey over Trump in the state that last voted for a Democrat candidate in 2012.
Chest thumping, beating trumpets. Both candidates for the US presidential election tried to ensure that their voters remain confident before the 5th November vote.
But all I can say is on Tuesday, just go out and vote, and we're going to close this thing out, and it's going to be party time. It's going to be party time. And this is really all you need to know. Kamala broke it, and I'll fix it, and we'll do it very quickly.
So, Michigan, 2 days to go. You ready? In one of the most consequential elections of our lifetime, and we have momentum. It is on our side. Can you feel it? The momentum because our campaign is tapping into the ambitions, the aspirations, and the dreams of the American people, because we are optimistic and excited about what we can do together.
One thing is for sure, that this was a very colorful election campaign, and both candidates have been neck and neck throughout. Posters are busy predicting the front runner. Atlas Inter's latest poll shows former President Donald Trump leading the predictions, especially in all 7 swing states. About 49% of the respondents said they would vote for Donald Trump in the upcoming presidential election, as the Republicans hold a 1.8% vote lead over his counterpart, Democrat Kamala Harris. The survey conducted on the first 2 days of November included nearly 2,500 likely voters in the US, the majority of which were female. A Reuters Ipsos poll published last week on 29 October showed Kamala Harris lead over Donald Trump, with the Democrat ahead by few percentage points over the Republican, 49% to 46%. The American website 538 of ABC focuses on opinion poll analysis. In their latest release, Harris had a small lead over Trump in the national polling averages, 48% to 47%.
Making Donald Trump one of the biggest losers.
The current Vice President Kamala Harris has led Trump in every Reuters, Ipsos and ABC 538 poll of registered voters since she entered the race in July and built a lead of nearly 4 percentage points towards the end of August. The polls were relatively stable in September and early October, but they have tightened in the last couple of weeks, with her lead steadily shrinking since late September. While national polls are a useful guide as to how popular a candidate is across the whole country, they are not the best way to predict the US presidential election result. Bureau Report, India Today.
Kamala, you're fired. Get out of here.
So what's at stake for the rest of the world? We've spoken about the nuances of American politics, but a lot rests for geopolitics basis what happens this week in the United States. And to talk about that, we're joined by Gideon Rahman, one of the world's most widely followed foreign affairs commentators. Thank you very much, Mr. Rahman, for joining us.
Pleasure.
How do you see the outcome of this presidential election shaping the hot button issues of geopolitics at a macro level? I'll get into issue by issue in just a moment, but broadly, in terms of the direction global politics takes at this moment, how does this verdict impact that?
I think it's, for once, actually, the choice is pretty stark. I mean, there are always elements, strong elements of continuity in American foreign policy, Republican or Democrat, but some of the things that Trump wants to do would be quite a radical break. So the first is obviously sharply increasing tariffs. He's talked about a 60% tariff on Chinese goods, which would be a kind of bomb under the world economy because US-China is the largest trading relationship in the world, 10 to 20% on everyone else. That would really mean that America is a deeply protectionist country, and because it's the world's largest market for many goods, it would be a kind of radical reshaping of world trade. I think in terms of war and peace, Trump has said repeatedly that he would create peace in Ukraine in one day. Now, there's an element of hyperbole there, but I think the way that people read it is that he's saying there would be no more big Western aid packages for Ukraine, that Ukraine would be forced to come to the table. Whether Putin would come to the table is, I think, an interesting question. He might feel the war's going sufficiently well that he'll keep going. But Trump would clearly want to end the war, and I think probably also try to rebuild relations with Russia. I think as far as India is concerned, both sides will continue to press for a very close US-Indian relationship. China, it's a bit ambiguous. I mean, but I think that the tariff thing would be huge for China.
Will Mr. Trump, if he wins, be able to implement the most radical parts of his campaign agenda? Many of his supporters argue that some of this is just said on the campaign trail. And if you see his actual record from 2016 to 2020, while he said a lot, he didn't necessarily go out and do many of those things.
Well, that's, a fair point. I mean, I think that there are 2 points there, really. The first is what's rhetoric and what is he's really intending to do, and the second is what stuff does he need to get through Congress and what doesn't he? But my sense is that there's at least 50-50 chance that Trump, a second Trump, would pursue some of his more radical ideas, because I think in the first term he was constrained by the fact that he appointed relatively conventional foreign policy advisors, people like H.R. McMaster, Rex Tillerson, who were very establishment Republicans. And many of those people have now bitterly denounced him and said they're not going to vote for him. John Bolton, John Kelly, his former chief of staff, has called him a fascist. So I think Trump is going to be surrounded by people who are much purer Trumpists, if you like, and more willing to really go for his agenda, including a man of Indian origin who you may have heard of called Kash Patel, who is an important Trump advisor and regarded with some fear by Democrats because I think he's somebody they think is very on board for purging the deep state, as Trump would call it. So I think Trump would be a bit more radical, and the question is, does he run into problems? I think tariffs he probably will do, and I think he can do it without having to get congressional approval for particular rates. Other issues, would he pull out of NATO? John Bolton has said that he would. I'm a bit more skeptical about that because, this is an alliance of, over 30 countries where America is the dominant force. So it's a great American diplomatic asset. I'm not sure he'd really pull out of NATO in the long run, but I think he might undermine the NATO security guarantee, the idea that America would automatically fight if a NATO country was attacked. And in the context of Russia potentially winning the war in Ukraine, that would be really quite significant.
Let's spend a moment on China. Looked at from the perspective of trying to halt China's march towards wanting to become a global superpower. Do these tariffs help push back China's march?
Well, they certainly wouldn't be welcomed in China. At a time when the Chinese economy is struggling really for the first time in 30 years. Their growth is slowing, and they don't seem to have an obvious answer. It's a big blow to them. I think the thing that you would always have to worry about, though, is, and it's true of almost any other economic sanction, is might you kind of deliver a blow in the short run, but make the problem worse in the long run? That, for example, if America started trying to force other countries to choose between American markets and Chinese markets, might quite a lot of them say, well, we're going with China, because China offers cheap EVs, cheap 5G. America doesn't really have a viable counteroffer. So some of it could backfire. I also think that, it kind of depends what you think is driving China, but if there's any debate in China about whether America is a dangerous adversary or not, and if there's still a school of people in China that want to manage the relationship and kind of get on with America, then sort of punching them in the face with tariffs probably sort of finishes off the internationalist school in China. So could arguably make China a more dangerous adversary over the long run. But it would be damaging to their economy. But whether it would, say, deflect them, end them as a military power, I really don't think so. There's been a formidable military build-up over the last 30 years. So the danger is that you might have a China that feels very angry, but has a massive military and still has its ambitions to displace the United States in Asia. It could become quite dangerous.
Is Donald Trump likely to be better than Kamala Harris from India's perspective? Is he going to be easier to deal with for Prime Minister Modi and the government?
I think, in some respects, it depends what you mean by better, but I think that, certainly I was in Delhi a couple of weeks ago, and it struck me that, you'll know this better than me, Rahul, but my sense was that certainly on the right in India, there's a feeling that the Republicans are less likely to give India a hard time on human rights, and particularly with this ongoing rumbling investigation to the alleged assassination plot on American soil, that the Democrats might be more legalistic, tougher on that, whereas Trump is more of a kind of deal maker and might say, well, you know what, the relationship's more important than that, I don't care. So I think there are quite strong sort of people-to-people relationships between the BJP and the Republicans, and possibly between Modi and Trump. That said, I mean, if you look at the last 4 years of US-Indian relations, it's hard to argue that the Biden administration, until this latest, argument about Mr. Panun came up, has been anything other than positive on its relations with India. I think any US government is going to see India as critical to their goal of containing Chinese power. And the US and India signed, I think in June, a very important deal on technology sharing. Now, that happened under Biden, and I think would continue to happen under Harris. I see you're asking, is Kamala losing the Indian vote? I don't know. I mean, I think that's another fascinating wrinkle. I mean, if Harris wins, and she has, her mother was Indian, very strong, spent a lot of her childhood visiting India. It's a country that, unlike almost any other American president, she knows well. But how that would affect her dealings specifically with a BJP government, I just don't know.
Kamala Harris seems more sympathetic to the Palestinian cause than Donald Trump. How do either of these choices impact the war in the Middle East?
Look, I think she is. Hard to be less sympathetic than Trump, but and I think she's more sympathetic than Biden, actually. But I think that any US president, there's a pretty narrow range in which they're going to move on that issue. I think she might try to be a bit tougher towards Netanyahu. There's no love lost there. And you could look at things like possibly restricting some arms sales, possibly even singling out one or two of the really far-right ministers in the Israeli government and, sanctioning them or something like that. I don't think that's beyond the bounds of possibility. But on the other hand, I don't think that there would be any question of putting Israel's security at risk. So even as they got tough with the Israelis over, indiscriminate killing in Gaza or what's happening on the West Bank, there would be a kind of ironclad commitment to defending Israel from missile attacks from Iran. So that would remain. And I also think that American domestic politics mean that there's always going to be a limit to how tough the US is going to get with Israel. It's a sort of matter of nuance rather than a complete rupture with previous policies.
How does the rest of the world react, and what can they possibly do if Donald Trump refuses to accept the verdict, especially if he's lost the election?
I don't know what the rest of the world just sort of sit there with their head in their hands watching. There's not much we can do. But I do think it's very damaging for America's kind of image of stability, because a lot of America's soft power, if you like, and authority in the world came from its argument that it had this political system that certainly for most of my life, most of the world looked to with admiration, because it delivered both sort of stability but liberty. And it seemed to show that you could have both at the same time, so that America could go through wrenching experiences like Watergate, the impeachment of a president, that a president was held up, accountable under the law, left power. That was Nixon in the 70s. That you had, the peaceful transfer of power was never under question in the United States, and now it is. And so that is a huge shock to Americans, but a huge shock to the world. And to the extent that part of what America says to the world is, look, our system works, it can be a model for you, don't go the Russia-China route. If America appears to be falling apart politically, that's very damaging. But also, I think it may kind of cause a sort of paralysis in American foreign policy. And I mean, I often think of the way that Putin thinks about the world, and I think Putin regards the sort of collapse of 89, 91 in Russia, eventually leading to the dissolution of the Soviet Union, as a sort of, as he said, a geopolitical tragedy, but one that stemmed from a crisis in the Russian political order. And I think he must be looking at Washington and thinking, maybe it's your turn now. Your system's about to collapse. And what would be the implications for American power around the world? We saw that Soviet power around the world crumbled when their domestic political order crumbled. Might the same thing happen to the United States? I think Putin would certainly be hoping so.
Putin and Xi Jinping would quite like that. A lot at stake very clearly on what happens in the United States. Gideon Rahman, for joining us. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
We're slipping into a quick break. We'll keep tracking the American elections very closely all through this week on India Today. Coming up on the other side, Khalistanis go on a rampage in Canada. Temple in Brampton is attacked. Details coming up on the other side.
जाओगी कैसे?
हेलो, मैं आ रहा हूँ। भगा कर ले जाऊंगा। सिक्योरिटी! भाग गए, पकड़ो उनको। हेलो। बोला था ना, भगा कर ले जाऊंगा।
एक हिंट तो देते?
हिंट?
बड़े आराम से।
By Cola makes you wish everything was as vibrant.
Motorola Razr 50 Ultra comes with Google Gemini.
एक दोस्त है जिससे बात किए बिना हम रह नहीं सकते। बातें घंटों की हों या कुछ सेकंड्स की। ये दोस्त हमेशा हमारी बात सुनता है, क्योंकि हमारा सबसे अच्छा दोस्त भगवान ही तो है। मंगलदीप, दिल से करो बात भगवान के साथ।
Pure Wash Electronic Seat by Kohler. Wish everything was this intelligent.
नया फोन? बिल्कुल मेरे जैसा।
तेरा ही फोन है। टीम बस में भूल आया था तू। क्रिकेट के बाद का प्लान ऐसे मत भूल जाना भाई।
क्रिकेट के बाद का प्लान मतलब पाजी?
मतलब रिटायरमेंट का प्लान।
इस जनरेशन ने तो उस बारे में सोचा भी नहीं होगा। नहीं भाई पहले मैच से ही सोचा है, इसलिए तो वो कर रखा है। वो मतलब क्या? वही जो सब लोग सही है करते रहते हैं।
म्यूचुअल फंड्स में SIP।
म्यूचुअल फंड्स में SIP। अगर ऐसे भूल भी जाओ ना तो भी रिटायरमेंट का प्लान बैकग्राउंड में चलते रहना चाहिए, ताकि आगे की लाइफ सेट रहे।
सही है।
म्यूचुअल फंड निवेश बाजार जोखिमों के अधीन है। योजना से जुड़े सभी दस्तावेजों को ध्यान से पढ़ें।
Welcome back on the Newstrack. Moments before now, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has tweeted about the attack at a Hindu temple in Brampton and Surrey in Canada. Prime Minister Modi has said he strongly condemns the deliberate attack on a Hindu temple in Canada. Equally appalling are the cowardly attempts to intimidate our diplomats. Such acts of violence will never weaken India's resolve. We expect the Canadian government to ensure justice and uphold the rule of law. Before this, 2 Hindu temples in Brampton and Surrey were attacked by Khalistani sympathizers, leading to outrage in Canada and India.
Khalistan supporters attacked Hindu devotees at temples in 2 cities of Canada. A group of Sikhs with Khalistani flags wielding sticks was seen entering the Hindu Sabha Mandir premises in Brampton on Sunday. Videos showed the assailants targeting devotees outside the temple, where the Indian High Commission had organized a consular camp.
When the Khalistanis came to our temple, how dare they come to our temple and assault people in our temple? And the cops, instead of standing with the temple, instead of standing with us, they arrested our own people. So is this two-tier policing? Are the police there for everybody? Or are the police only there for the Khalistanis?
A similar attack unfolded at the Lakshmi Narayan Mandir in Surrey. Videos showed Khalistani supporters raise anti-India slogans. The protesters later turned violent, targeting pro-India voices. There was high tension in Surrey as the police used force against the temple devotees and detained 1 or more Hindus from the compound, leading to protest by the community.
All the police officers hitting us. Everybody.
After the attack on the Hindu Sabha temple in Brampton by pro-Khalistan hardliners, the priest addressed a gathering and called for unity.
अब ये एक हमला कोई हिंदू सभा पर नहीं है, ये हमला पूरे वर्ष में दुनिया में जितने हिंदू हैं सबके ऊपर है। No peace, no, no peace, no, that's not right, that's not right. He's a king, he's a king, he's a king.
The temple trust called for a thorough investigation and demanded the sacking of a police officer who allegedly assaulted a young devotee.
Temple committee requested the police to reinforce more policing, and they also, asking the people to just be calm and peaceful. We strongly condemn such incidents that Hindu place of worship is being attacked, and inactive action from political leadership or administration.
The Ontario Sikh Gurdwara body condemned the attacks, calling for peace, unity and respect within the community. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau condemned the acts of violence and said everyone should feel safe in their place of worship. Canadian MP Chandra Arya stated that Khalistani extremists had crossed a red line and accused the Trudeau government of failing the Hindu community in Canada. The Indian High Commission posted photos from the consular camp held in Brampton, which were attended by a large number of Sikh community members. The High Commission said the Canadian authorities were informed about the camp well in advance in view of the security concerns. The statement added that other consular camps that are scheduled will depend on security provided by the Canadian government. Bureau Report, India Today.
This is where I wrap up the Newstrack tonight. For your time and your trust, thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow evening at 8 p.m. Through this week, we'll be building up to the big election results in the United States, the most significant election that will determine and shape the global geopolitical order. Details coming up at 8 p.m. tomorrow. Thank you for tuning in tonight. Goodbye and good night.
जाओगी कैसे?
हेलो, मैं आ रहा हूँ। भगा कर ले जाऊंगा। सिक्योरिटी! भाग गए, पकड़ो उनको। हेलो, बोला था ना, भगा कर ले जाऊंगा।
एक हिंट तो देते?
हिंट?
बड़े आराम से।
Sveda by Cola. Wish everything cared for your skin.
जमाने से हटकर बेबाक है मेरा सिग्नेचर। Signature Finest Cardamom Seeds, a premium product from Dilbar Group.
Colors by Cola makes you wish everything was as vibrant.
हो जा रंगीला रे with Motorola's incredible range of smartphones.
Hello, Moto.
जाओगी कैसे?
हेलो, मैं आ रहा हूँ। भगा कर ले जाऊंगा। सिक्योरिटी! भाग गए, पकड़ो उनको। हेलो, बोला था ना, भगा कर ले जाऊंगा।
एक हिंट तो देते?
हिंट?
बड़े आराम से।
Pure Wash Electronic Seat by Kohler. Wish everything was this intelligent.
Motorola Razr 50 Ultra comes with Google Gemini.
Hi, I am AI anchor Sana, bringing the top headlines for you, presented by Motorola. PM Modi attacks India alliance before Jharkhand Assembly elections, says JMM Congress and RJD has taken the policy of appeasement to an extreme level. Election Commission transfers Maharashtra DGP Rashmi Shukla amid opposition's phone-tapping allegations. BJP leader BB Tyagi joins Aam Aadmi Party ahead of Delhi Assembly polls.
Make your media plan smarter with India Today Live TV on your connected devices. Amplify your brand with 100 million smart internet viewers. To advertise, mail us at sales@aajtak.com.
Good evening, viewers. Let's take a look at the weather report across the major cities this evening. Thiruvananthapuram is at 27 degrees Celsius with an AQI of 36. Mumbai is at 37 degrees Celsius with an AQI of 129. Panji is at 34 degrees Celsius with an AQI of 50. Ahmedabad is at 36 degrees Celsius with an AQI of 63. Bhopal is at 32 degrees Celsius with an AQI of 109. Jaipur is at 33 degrees Celsius with an AQI of 118. Delhi is at 31 degrees Celsius with an AQI of 204. Srinagar is at 20 degrees Celsius with AQI being 69. Lucknow is at 30 degrees Celsius with an AQI of 164. Patna is at 29 degrees Celsius with an AQI of 125. Kolkata is at 30 degrees with an AQI of 171. Hyderabad is at 30 degrees Celsius with an AQI of 111. Bangalore is at 26 degrees Celsius with an AQI of 40. Chennai is at 31 degrees Celsius with an AQI of 39. This is all we have for you in this segment. Hope wherever you are, you find favorable weather around you. Keep watching India Today for all the weather updates with me, AI Sana, all through the day.
Presented by JK Tyre, Desh Ka Tyre. Co-presented by Greenply, healthy and safe interior ka reply. Co-powered by the bold look of Kohler.
Good evening, hello and welcome. You're with the news today. This is your primetime destination news. Newsmakers' talking points. Our big talking point: who will win the race for America? That's right, the big US elections less than 24 hours away. Also, as Khalistani supporters target Hindus in Canada, I'll be joined by former Canadian Minister and the Premier of British Columbia, Ujjwal Dosanjh, will be speaking out. Also, our other exclusive, Sunil Gavaskar, will join us on the Kiwi whitewash. Lots on the show tonight as always, but first it's time for the 9 headlines at 9. India-Canada relations worsen after Hindu temples are attacked by Khalistani extremists. Prime Minister Modi condemns it, asks the Trudeau government to ensure justice. Less than 23 hours to go for America to vote. Rival contenders Donald Trump, Kamala Harris locked in a neck-to-neck fight. All eyes on 7 crucial swing states. Maharashtra's deadline to withdraw nominations ends. Both alliances struggle with the rebel factor. 27 Mahayuti rebels, 12 Aghadi rebels still in the race. Prime Minister Narendra Modi stirs a tribal versus outsider debate on the campaign trail in Jharkhand. Claims infiltrators will take away tribals' lands and their daughters. JMM accuses Modi of dividing people. By polls rescheduled in Kerala, Uttar Pradesh and Punjab, poll body differs, voting in 14 seats, citing festivities. Samajwadi Party, Aam Aadmi Party cry conspiracy. Trouble mounts for Karnataka's Chief Minister Siddaramaiah. Lok Ayug summons him for questioning in the alleged Muda scam on November 6th. Bus tragedy in Uttarakhand. 36 killed after a bus falls into a deep gorge in Almora. Death toll likely to mount. Chief Minister Dhami meets the injured. Supreme Court blasts Delhi government over deteriorating air quality, says ban on firecrackers was hardly implemented. Notice sent to Delhi top cop and AAP government. An Indian Air Force fighter plane crashes and goes into flames during a routine sortie in Agra. Pilot ejects to safety. Court of inquiry ordered.
Presented by Parul University, Vadodara, Gujarat.
Co-presented by Aapka Joy, Bharat Ka Joy, Joy E-Bike.
But our breaking story this evening is coming from the big battleground state of Maharashtra, where the nomination withdrawal deadline has ended, but there are several rebels still in the fray.